Excellent. Thank you for being so eager to participate. So a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. This meeting is being recorded and it will be available on INTEA YouTube channel at some point later, well, this week, hopefully, maybe next week early. There are also 20-something other videos that you might be interested in. We sometimes refer to them, and yeah, there's a lot of good stuff if you have free time. Today we will be talking about visual design, right? And this is the first of our last 3 breakfasts.
Yeah, we are going to have 2 more breakfasts before we go on a summer break, so you can mark them in your calendar already. It's both. One is going to happen in 2 weeks, and the other one in 4 weeks. Same time, same place, so to say.
Yes.
We'll tell you in a minute what are those breakfasts are
Yes.
going to be about, because we are kind of starting.
I wouldn't call it a series. I would say it's a theme, right?
Yeah.
So we spoke a lot about
Sales,
certain topics,
yeah.
like sales and marketing, your e-learning to your audience, which is essentially about bringing your learners kind of to the water, right? So you can get them into opening the course, into eagerly logging into yeah, that's Banksy. Oh, you remind me one thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's about getting learners to actually go ahead and try learning eagerly, not being forced into this and so on. Now, in terms of what happens next, this is probably the topic of 3 breakfasts. So what do we do to make that learning better? And there are 3 key things to that, I would say. Yeah, this is, by the way, the INTEA channel I was referring to. Just Google YouTube INTEA learning. If you don't add learning, you will find other INTEAs of the world, which is our hobby of collecting those. People do weird stuff and call it INTEA. All right, so 3 things, basically, the 3 keystones to creating good learning at scale, cheaply, robustly, with high quality, and so that people like it. One is visual design. Another one, which we'll talk about in 2 weeks, is the art of instruction. We'd like to wrap up this season kind of summarizing and talking about things which matter in terms of what we actually say to the learners, how we talk to them about what topics, what tools are at our disposal. How do we choose a method of instruction given the content that we have and stuff like that. And finally, the 3rd keystone is the technology behind all of that. I think it will be a good wrap up for you for the summer. Maybe you'll spend the summer browsing different offerings on the web and choosing your next LMS or next authoring tool or something like that. There is a lot of things going on in that area right now, and I think we are on the brink of rather exciting things happening. So we'll talk about that. So these are kind of the 3 topics for the upcoming 3 breakfasts. Now, one last thing, if you are new here, well, first of all, welcome. Thank you for joining. I see there is a lot of Fresenius people here. Thank you so much for joining. And in every breakfast, we use movies as illustrations. And there's a little game going on in the comments. It's about guessing those movies. So if you can, there's 3 of them right here. 2 are easy, 1 is difficult. And yeah, if you see a movie, type in the chat. All right, so first of all, kind of over to you guys. How important is visual design to you? Like if you start a new e-learning project, like a new course or a new learning program online, how much effort and time do you spend on visual design? Kind of percentage-wise. Is it like 0%? We don't consider design at all. We just create content and kind of the design isn't there or just doesn't happen or maybe happens automatically, or 100% of time is spent on design and we never get anything else done while arguing about which stock image we should put on the front page.
And we have answers somewhere between 40 and 85%.
Wow, that's
20, yeah, 20 is the lowest bidder so far.
okay. Well, that's a lot. That's a lot, I must say. Hope that these are not INTEA guys who are on this call as well, who give us those high numbers. But that's a lot. But as always, we look not at specific numbers, but rather at trends. And the question is whether this number is rising or falling. So can you let me know if you like? And it's an additional question, just sprung to my head. Is it rising or falling? Like, is it more or less than you were spending previously? Okay. Just a sec, I will switch.
We have a comment that it's usually contents from SMEs, so they concentrate mostly on design and didactic. But yeah, think of the last 3-4 years. Try to remember how it was in those days, and do you think you're spending more or less?
Yeah.
Hard to say.
Hard to say. Yeah,
apparently.
Could be hard to say as well. Maybe no change at all. Well, anyhow, for us, I think it's been decreasing and decreasing quite rapidly. So what happened in the past couple of years for INTEA? Well, first of all, we got rid of our visual design department. We don't have a design department anymore. Doesn't mean that everybody who works on design is fired. It's that we have created a creative department, right? We have joined the people who create content with people who create the form or shape of that content or choose that, because we felt that keeping them separate as processes in those departments was not really useful anymore. And I would say that we have less conversations with customers often about designs for a number of reasons that I will get into a little bit later. But for us, it's been decreasing. So it's a weird time for us in that sense. This is okay. Let me tell you something frankly. I wanted to give a different presentation. I have a presentation from 2014, which has been a huge success. I went to a number of conferences from United States to Russia with that presentation on minimalist design and on how INTEA learned to design awesome courses from Sweden. Because all the first clients that we started working with, almost all of them were from Sweden, and Sweden, as you know, has a very interesting sense of design, and we'll talk about this. But when I started thinking about how do I talk about all of this in 2021 in the breakfast where we have this kind of open conversations, it didn't feel right. I thought like, no, I don't want to talk about this anymore because it's somehow none of this works anymore. And I started thinking why. And I understood that visual design doesn't matter anymore because we kind of, this number, however high it might be, it's decreasing. It's falling close to zero in many projects. We'll give you examples of those projects in a second. And I blew up all that presentation. There is a little tail of that presentation that I will share with you, and then I'll explain what happened to the rest of it. Okay, so the presentation kind of goes like this. In 2010, pretty much, I think we got our first Swedish clients.
Yeah.
And we had a bit of trouble working with them, frankly, because our sense of design, our sense of what works, of what looks best, how illustrations should work, fonts and backgrounds and images and icons and navigation, all that stuff that you often think about, we somehow had a difference of opinion every step of the way because we were used to learning that we were seeing locally, we were seeing in other places in Europe, we were seeing in the United States,
and importantly, I think as well, the attention to detail was on a completely different level.
Right.
Where every pixel matters. Yes. And every font size matters. It had to be perfect.
Yes, they were perfectionists in that sense, and we know that Sweden has an interesting sense of design. Everyone knows IKEA, of course, But if you go to Sweden, you like ride this train from the Stockholm Arlanda airport to the city, and this is the most nicely designed train ever, super sleek and modern and ecological, and every pixel on that train is perfect as well. So anyhow, we started digging, and I started looking into why is that difference? How does it work? I started reading books, and it turned out that it's not about e-learning and not even about visual design. It started with architecture in early 20th century, and then moved on to consumer products, and it was a journey. And here's what I understood. I found this. This is my favorite slide of all time. This is a can of sardines. Should be very familiar to anyone in the Baltics, I think. And if you think of it as a course, you will find that it has a design, right? It has some content, it has illustration, it has your corporate logo on that slide, so to say. It has some mandatory information that you had to put there because your lawyer department like made you put this on every slide or something. And it also has some functionality, like the key to open that. And you can see how that functionality clashes with the design, because obviously the guys who came up with the functionality did not talk to the guys who came up with the design. So you can see how it just cuts right in here, and in general doesn't care about design. And
most importantly, the sardines that are inside do not look like on the picture, on the packaging. So it's a bit of a lie there as well.
I would say overpromise, let's say, right? Yeah. If you ever open the can like that, never looks like, oops, what happened? I lost my button. Yeah, this is the IKEA sardines. You can go to IKEA locally and find a can. It will look like that. And you can see how well it works between functionality and the design. They kind of complement each other. You can obviously see that those two departments were either one department, like in INTEA, or they talk to each other a lot. You can see how the content is minimized. And also, while there is the information about what's inside, including visually, it does not overpromise anything, right? It kind of symbolizes stuff, but does not overpromise. And it's such a nice design solution if you compare to that. So I will not do a poll, but answer to yourself. Do your courses, does your learning, do your presentations look more like this can or that can, right? And are you on the way to IKEA? And this is the question kind of that I ask myself every time I design a slide or something. So that simplicity, that love between functionality and design, that is what Swedish design is about. And like I said, its roots are in early 20th century, where it started in probably art, and then architecture, and then type form, and then moved to consumer electronics. And I would say that the pioneer of all the minimalism that we have today is this guy. His name is Dieter Rams, and he's German. And he worked for a company called Braun, and they have designed all the awesome electronics of 1960s. He personally has designed most of that because it was a revolution. Technologies have changed. The plastics came about, microelectronics came about, things have miniaturized really quickly, and you had to and the content did not dictate the form anymore, right? So you could do pretty much anything with the form, and the question was, what do we do in this space era now? And he came up with this, and he has a follower. Can you guess who that follower is in 21st century, so to say? Right? You can check the chat if we have any questions or rather answers.
Steve Jobs, there's a Steve Jobs, there's a Steve Jobs.
Yes, that's
not really
95% correct. But actually, that guy, and definitely Steve Jobs, but Steve Jobs hired this particular person his name is Johnny Ive, and he's the president of product design for Apple for longest time. He's European, he's British. Not so European anymore, but anyhow. So his biggest project was the iPod. And there is a story that when he brought the first prototype to Steve Jobs and said, this is the smallest music player that we can do that can hold 100,000 songs or something. And Steve Jobs said, well, can you make it smaller? It needs to be smaller. And he said, no, there is no way. Then Steve Jobs took this iPod and put it into an aquarium, like a fish tank in his office. And bubbles came out. And he said, you see bubbles? It means there's space inside, right? So you can make it smaller. So this guy is like, and he talked about this a lot. You can see how he moved from this design to that design, and how this echoes, and how minimalism of 60s inspired this 21st century design. Because again, new technologies came about, and you could create anything with the form. And when you can create anything, like on internet, why would you create more where you can create less? And then, of course, this design was developed into one of the most famous designs of all time, into an iPhone. So if you're a fan of Apple design or good design in general, and if you see an iPhone or you want to have an iPhone, then remember that essentially it's all inspired by a can of sardines. Mm-hmm. So that was the intro to my lecture. And what would I do then for the next hour, and what was my initial plan for the next 40 minutes, is to talk about how minimalism works well in designing learning, and how we've been using this successfully for the past lots of years, and how other companies have minimized stuff. I would give examples of companies who would remove shadows and backgrounds and gradients and fake 3D and all those special effects and just flatten everything. You just grab an iron and flatten your logo and flatten your design. It makes so much sense, and makes it easier to deliver on mobile, which is a huge influence of this on this, of course, and across different devices, because you don't know what environment your course will be watched in. Maybe it's an iPod, or maybe it's an iPhone, maybe it's a work laptop, maybe it's a projector or a TV at home, or maybe it's a smartwatch or Tesla screen or anything pretty much. And for that, you can't have those complex designs which have to be adjusted every time. You have to have simplicity, you have to have minimalism, which relies on basic elements to convey meanings, and that's what we've been using. And companies have moved on. Microsoft with the Internet Explorer. This is not a very old screenshot. This is like maybe 7 years ago or something. Moved on to again, flat shapes, bold forms, fonts and colors to convey meaning. And this is what we want to do with courses, go from this to that. And I would then go on to give examples of course designs, like this course design, for example, where you have those backgrounds which get in the way of texts, which you have then to wash out, which then kind of destroys the idea of having the background in the first place and makes it all less readable and does not work, and so on and so on. And then how easier it is to this is an example from 2010, I think, from Sweden that we worked with. And how removing backgrounds really helps, and how stuff can even blend into background to disappear, and how courses can breathe, and how you can embrace this white space. This is an example from INTEA, for example, and where you can have slides where you can move stuff around and animate, for example, without caring that it would clash with background and so on. I would explain how much valuable space is wasted on design, where the actual content of this course could be fit into a tweet, more or less, right? But you have all this design around that. Why don't we make the course which looks like a book? We had a client who asked us, well, can you make the book page flipping sound every time I go to the next slide or something like that? And this is not designed by us, by the way. And how you can get rid of that to actually give more space to things that matter, which either provide emotional impact or our actual content. And this is one of my favorite designs for a grocery store chain in the Baltics, because it uses all the available space that there is, while still being fun, having all the necessary elements. So white space is a concept which is not always related to white. And then I would explain the idea of contrast. This is, I don't know why it says brainstrike.com there. I stole it from some course on for electrical engineers, and you don't know where to look in this image, right? It's so non-contrast. It has so much going on everywhere. And if I ask you to guess where you should click, well, first of all, you wouldn't be able to guess, and second of all, I wouldn't be able to tell because I have no idea. And I would explain how contrast works, how you can create contrast and why it matters, and why suites do that, and why you don't have to have like color on the white if you want contrast, and why you can have inverted contrast. For example, and it's a whole lecture. It's very lots of cool examples, lots of things that we've been doing. But today we are not doing that anymore. And my concluding thought to that lecture years ago, a super successful hit, was that it kind of looks like we're giving a funeral to that lecture.
Yeah, a little bit.
That was a good lecture. It served us well for years. And my conclusion was less is more, right? So it's still valid. So if you look at something and you feel that it's not professional and it can be better and can be better designed or work better or more engaging or something, think about things that you can remove from it rather than add to it. Right, so removing stuff helps way more, and less is more. That was the idea, and everyone would get up and give me a standing ovation at that point, typically at conferences. Mm-hmm. So don't do that right now. So or do. That was the idea, but the question is, why doesn't it work anymore in 2021 or even a few years prior? Why is it getting even less than less is more? And before we actually talk about that, let me know if you found that first lecture useful, right? So do you think your designs are already minimalist? Like, do you think you're overcrowding your design or not? And if you think that this is the direction you're moving in, you don't have to stick to those options. It's just an example. You can say, of course it is, or you're not at all, or let me know about any opinion that you might have. Let me bring up the chat here. To some extent, not quite. Okay, for the most part, excellent. And that's interesting. Kind of people indicate that they spend a lot of time on design, and at the same time, I hear that a lot. People say that, and this is why this lecture is pretty much dying. People keep saying that, it's kind of not extremely new. The examples that you're showing us are kind of old, and we do understand that it's old, and we don't do that. And like Barbara says, it depends on the internal customer.
Of course, that's always the case.
Yeah, a good SME can always spoil a course. Like nothing can stop them. And yes, it's also about the amount of content. If you overcrowd it with content, design will not matter in the end. And keeping it consistent, a lot of effort. That's also a huge part of why this thing is happening, why design is going away, it's because it's very difficult to keep designs consistent. If you have to design every slide, how do you keep them consistent? You spend a lot of time on actually creating stuff, and then even more time on trying to keep all of that in line. It's like, getting 7 cats and then trying to keep them all in the same room, and they will be like crawling out. This is like what slides do pretty much. And and then at the same time they will look samey. So that's a huge question. So anyhow, let us spend the other half of the hour I don't know. I keep seeing this thing that we hold hands. We're not holding hands in that photo. So it's an illusion. Yes, it's wishful thinking. Maybe. So let us tell you how we think the design will work in the next maybe 5 years, and why we're moving away from the concept of visual design, and why we don't design slides internally almost, and why probably you shouldn't design them, or you won't be able to design them pretty soon at all. Right? So I would say there are three key reasons to that. Reason number one is that the understanding of good design has come a huge way in the past maybe 10 years. The good design is all around us. You don't see crappy presentations that often in conferences anymore. They're well designed. Most of the content that you consume is well designed because it has no design. If you go to Facebook, right, you can't pick fonts. You don't have friends who type everything in Comic Sans on Facebook just because they think it's beautiful, but in fact it's super annoying. And that's because Facebook does not allow you to choose fonts, right? You don't have overly long tweets. Well, simply because Twitter will not let you create long texts, right? Instagram, well, it used to be, now it's not 100%, but kind of confines you to a certain picture format, right? Which looks, it's different all the time, but kind of looks a little bit the same. We are surrounded by nicely designed interfaces in our phones, in our computers, in the visual advertising that we see, in the IT systems that we consume. Even work systems have been well designed now. If you go to an internet bank, most of them are greatly designed, right? If you look at an LMS, all the learning management systems really look slick and nice, except for Moodle out of package, but even that can be fixed. Mm-hmm. So we are surrounded by good design, and we're used to good design. So we kind of, and it kind of happens automatically because of those systems. So we have less conversations about those things because they became ingrained in our kind of vision in the past few years. So the other one is, which I touched upon already, most of the design decisions are already pre-made. Someone made them instead of us. Either the designer of the system that you're using. So if you're putting something into a content management system that you're using for learning creation, then most of the things are already designed once, and you can't do that. On BranchTrack, which is a tool that we use for creating certain pieces of learning, like simulations, for example. We used to have like a whole menu dedicated to design choices, and you could choose transparencies and whether you want rounded corners on your speech bubbles, and whether you wanted to select certain font and font size and regulate all of that. And then we spent a few years maintaining that menu. Then we looked at it and we saw that clients who used it never created anything nice, and which would look nicer than we could design. So we just removed that menu. Now you can't design anything. On BranchTrack, you can only pick your company color, and that's it. The color will be automatically inserted where you need it, and that's it. You don't like...
what else do you need?
What else do you need? Exactly. It will look good. Don't worry about it. So this is the attitude that a lot of tool designers have now, and in many cases we don't even have control over it. Another one is that everything seems a little bit samey today, right? It's like
look at this.
Yeah, two different fonts, two super competing brands, and if I took Raivis' phone or he took mine, probably it would take him like 30 seconds to figure out how it works, which was not true, right? Does anyone remember that? There was a time when companies were looking for the best design to win everyone, and it kind of looks like 3 slides from your latest course. If it does, I have like terrible news for you. But that was kind of the time when they searched for form, and they thought that design was the key to winning the competition. And do you know the company? Do you know what happened to them? Are they around? No, it did not work. So that is what's happening to everyone else and to your courses as well. The search for something new, unforeseen, engaging is pretty much over, and everyone is converging to the same kind of design. There are a number of advantages or other market forces that lead to that. One is that, well, the kind of ideal shape has been found.
Yeah,
potentially. Like all cars kind of finally figured out how they need to look. The other one is that it's cheaper to produce, right? But the most important one is that it grants you instant recognition. So like all coffee places look the same all over the world. I cannot tell you whether this is Stockholm or New York or Moscow or Riga. You don't know, right? All coffee places have those brick walls, have those
chocolate shades and tones of color. Yeah, it has to look coffee.
All the canvas stuff, all the hardwood with metallic legs stuff and so on. All coffee places look the same. Why? Because they are instinctively, as a crowd, they are using the McDonald's strategy. Why? You go to McDonald's in a place where you don't know anything. Well, because it's instantly recognizable. It's safe. You know what to expect. It kind of communicates that to you by being there. Same with the coffee places. If you go to that place, you can kind of pre-guess the price level, the menu choices, the attitude, the atmosphere by just looking at that. And this is the market force that drives them to. The other one is AirBNB. This is just a random shot from AirBNB apartment. I have no idea where that is. Could be in Riga, could be in Copenhagen, could be in Madrid or New York or pretty much anywhere. They all look samey as well. Again, there is a market force which forces people to copy stuff and kind of figure out one best. And again, there's a lot of IKEA going on in there as well, because it's also cheap and efficient to create those looks. So same thing, kind of, the world has figured out the design for the next few years, so we don't have to think about it too much and just copy the best ones. And also it saves enormous amounts of energy. This is where we're getting back to learning. Like, reminder, we are still a learning company, not a rental or a coffee shop. And the problem is that if you have to hire people and you have to read through a bunch of CVs, you would probably enjoy if they were formatted the same way, so you can just quickly scan it and understand what's where, and where to look for the phone and where to look for the name or where to look for the experience, instead of hiring a creative guy who sends you this template. And it's a real, like, if you Google resume template creative on Google Images, you'll find this. So if someone sends you this, unless you're really looking for a person like that, it's just annoying. In many cases, it's really annoying to just, you can't scan, you can't work with it. It requires effort. If I wasn't looking specifically for someone who is not like everyone else, I would just throw it out. If these were slides in my course or courses or pages or any interfaces that I have to deal with, I would say, I don't have time for this, and just skip it. So this is what's happening to learning as well, right? Every time you create a new design and you think about design, it takes a toll in terms of energy and attention that your learners can spend on it. So if you look at how online shopping has developed, they are all the same. These are two biggest European companies who sell stuff like clothing and shoes online. And they look almost identical because, if you Google Jacob's Law, it's a big research which pretty much states that people spend 99% of their time outside of your course, probably, hopefully. And you don't want to force them to learn new interface, right? You want them to learn the stuff that you need them to learn, rather than to learn how to use or get used to or get acquainted with a new interface every time. Sometimes, even between slides, like this slide had this type of navigation and the next slide has a different one because we need to spice it up and keep them engaged. Or, people say that our courses are boring, so why don't we do that or something? So that's, you wanted to say something?
Just to add that, for example, when I said that word, so how to use this course, I have now remembered that we almost don't have that slide anymore in any courses because there is this dominant design. Everybody's learned the button forward and the button back, and everybody knows how a menu looks.
Yes, and all the other buttons have pretty much disappeared because it turns
yeah.
out that you don't need a glossary in every course and so on. But yeah, we used to have this slide, how to navigate. It was the second slide in every course that we did, front page, how to navigate. Like, why would you teach people how to navigate every bloody time? Have you seen the how to navigate post on Facebook? No, but somehow people of all IQs apparently are using Facebook quite successfully, some of them more successfully than others. This is what happened to learning as well. This is a course designed in Articulate Rise. There are a lot of other tools like that, but this is a tool that dictates you the layouts and spacing and visual style and all you can do.
And this is actually, and this is actually when this minimalist design approach started to break down. Because when we started to use, let's use Rise as an example, and our clients, especially from Scandinavia, where they were very much used to minimalist design and every pixel being in the right place, they were complaining, but on this phone it looks like that, and on this phone it looks like that, but we really want this button to be these 3 pixels smaller away from the right, from the bottom of the screen, and this disappeared because we could not provide consistently that exactly the same experience.
It was like, hey, we can design this from scratch, make sure it's pixel perfect on every device. It will cost you exactly 10 times, or well, maybe
because we will have to
20 times more than using Articulate Rise and just putting your content together, adding a few illustrations in your corporate color, and away you go. And you wanted to create 50 courses in 7 weeks, so we better get to it, right? And they let it go because they heard it from every provider, and also people used to the fact that things look different on different devices. Like YouTube on my TV looks different than YouTube on my phone, and some things are more annoying, some less annoying. But it's okay. I know it's YouTube. I'm only interested in content pretty much anyhow, and not that much in design. So yeah, that was a big shift in that as well. So kind of the minimalist approach, also minimalist in terms of the effort that we need to spend on technicalities, kind of came to us, even if we weren't looking for it. So this is just an example of how you can rebrand for a different company, and that's it. Everything else is set, right? So that's the final part is about pre-made decisions, and one of the things that we do is we make design decisions once, right? So we take on a new client, or you say that okay, we are building this new way of building e-learning essentially. And what you do, you design templates, right? You start from wireframes, and then you add your corporate design to it, and you analyze the content. You understand what type of slides you need for that. You find the easy to achieve variations because, image on the left, text on the right, or vice versa is an easy variation, right?
Of course. And more importantly, what happens next is that it is not the people who work with content who dictate how it will look. And it's also not the people from design part who dictate how it will look, but it's the system that dictates you to fit into certain patterns, into certain wireframes, into certain ways of working.
Yeah, your design decisions are essentially limited from a number of sides. On one hand, you have the corporate brand, and now branding has found their way to the learning departments almost everywhere. And you don't have to make those decisions on your own. They create new visuals and templates and fonts and so on. They create the whole design system, the elements out of which you can create stuff. On one hand, on the other hand, there are technical limitations of tools and that you use because you want to use tools simply because the other way of creating something customized is not achievable given the time constraint, the amount of courses you have to produce, the budget constraints, and so on. And on the other side is this kind of generic understanding of what looks good and what doesn't. So in between those borders, your room for maneuver is minimal. And this is why we're saying that there are not so many design conversations happening, and definitely not about every new course, but rather once at the very beginning of a very long journey, I would say.
8 years ago, even 5 years ago, when we would start a course, we would go to our experts. We show them a library of different styles. We show them many examples. They would pick and choose.
Right.
And then we would create mock-ups to reconfirm that we are on the right path. And they would say that, okay, it does work or it doesn't work. And that costed a lot of money. That was very costly either for us or for the customer. These days, what happens, there's always this decision we have to be in line with the brand or some guidelines that were worked out before. With most of our customers, not everyone yet, but we're going there. And then what we do, we only show the prototype that is in line with those agreements. And usually, not even usually, never ever experts complained, from a design perspective. They would say that there is something to the flow, to the content, to the, to the look and feel, to the emotion of it, but we would never be discussing that this green button has to be yellow and it has to be bigger or it has to be with a shadow.
Or, we've had this green button for 15 slides now. This is slide 16. Let's spice it up.
Let's do something.
Because we need this to be engaging.
It has disappeared.
Anyhow, so the big question for the final part is what comes next? And this is a movie, as you might guess. And it's an easy movie to guess. It's a terrible movie. I only Googled it because of the name. So, what comes next? Well, there are those 5 things which should have been animated one by one on this slide, probably.
But not in this breakfast.
Yes, but not today. So, well, first of all, is the idea of design thinking, right? So, visual design is dead. Viva la design thinking. The idea of design thinking is that you try and find clever ways about achieving your goals instead of focusing on the form or shape of things. To give you an example, like if you can get rid of an element instead of designing it, that's the kind of design thinking. To give you an example, we had a client. They are a huge bank which has a huge call center, like 45,000 people on phones working from home through their IT system. And they need to be trained because they are all part-time employees who can work sometimes, 10 hours a week, doing calls on behalf of that bank, which they call themselves a bank. They are essentially a microcredit organization. But tons of people, lots of turnover of people, lots of people to be trained. And we created training for them, and then they came to us and said, okay, there is this questionnaire that they fill out with the client. Once the customer says that, hey, we're happy that, to take on this credit or that loan that you're offering us, you need to fill out the questionnaire, name, surname, address, passport number, all types of personal details, average income, name of spouse,
employer information,
property information, whether you have a flat, whether you have a car, whether it's leased or not, and so on. All that stuff that we know we can take from you in case you don't pay, essentially we can give you a credit rating for that, and make like a specific offer or issue that card. They're essentially issuing physical credit cards to people. So to fill out these 40 fields of information on the phone, they had about 90 slides of instruction, about 2 slides per field explaining what can go wrong in that field. To give you an example, there are people who don't have surnames, like they work internationally. There are places where people don't have surnames. There are places where houses don't have numbers. And we said to them, that's pretty much every house in Latvia outside of cities. And they said, wow, this is so interesting. So there are certain key aspects to how you take down employer information so you can then legally use that information in court, for example, to contact that employer. There are lots of nuances that will probably hit you once in your lifetime in that company that might happen to you, but you still need to know them. So you need to learn 90 slides, about 40 fields of questionnaire, maybe years before you will use any of that information, if ever. And we said, we will not be doing that. This sounds like a disaster. Like, I don't see any learner testimonials from that saying, thank you, that was one of the most exciting trainings we've had.
And one of the most valuable.
One of the most valuable, and so on. So what we suggested instead, we took those slides, we reformulated them into tooltips, and we said, okay, you go to your IT system and you talk to your IT guys to add those tooltips to all the fields. So if I'm stuck and I have a problem about a certain field, I can click on this little question icon and it will pop up with this simple tooltip explaining me what happens. And that will solve about 50% of your problems. Another 50% of problems will be solved by field validation, right? You don't need to teach me how to fill in the value of a car if my field automatically formats it correctly for me or does not allow me to input incorrect information. And that's it. You will solve like 95% of these problems with zero learning involved. And they were super happy about that. And what still amazes me, it took them about 48 hours to deliver, like about one business day to actually decide on that internally, and then another day to actually implement it physically in the IT systems. They're a bank, like a huge organization. So inside they have an IT department who just fixed it in a day. And that was a hugely successful project, which involved zero learning, and I don't think we even made any money from that. That was kind of like a free consulting on top of the previous big program. But that is the kind of design thinking and zero design, looking for those zero designs when you can. So another example, like if we talk about zero designs, is a bank. That was actually a Latvian bank. They have a huge chain of retail.
Used to have, yeah, that was
yes,
3-4 years.
Yeah, I guess a bank. They used to have a large retail banking chain, and they used to do currency conversions, right? So you come with a bunch of dollars and you get lats, I think, at that point, and you come with a bunch of Japanese yen and you get dollars and so on. So their cashiers, like employees, had to work with a lot of currency, paper currency, and they needed to know a lot of stuff. Well, first of all, what that currency is, then they have to look up the exchange rate. Then they have to make sure that the currency is not counterfeit, right? They need to know how to check Japanese yen for not being counterfeit. And they were serving like 40 plus currencies. And that's a lot of tricks to know about different currencies. And also there were specific tricks, like there were types like older dollars, like issued before 1960, would be
discounted.
Would have like a 5% discount on the exchange rate, or rather not a discount, but they would add a commission on top of that because they're old and stuff like that. And what they used to have was like an 80 megabyte PDF file on the shared server, which they downloaded to the branch and then used to look through that when they had any questions. And of course, the 80 megabytes, they would update it from time to time, but not everyone would download it regularly. So that was another problem. And they said, okay, we need like a learning course so that everyone can learn those things by heart or something like that. So we said that is absolutely impossible. And we offered them to design an app. Again, you can do that internally using like pretty simple authoring tools. Design an app where you can just go in, you can select the country/currency, And then you can say select the value of that banknote. So let's say it's Japan, and then it's 1,000, and then you go in and you can see all the information on different types and years, and you can look for the security information, you can look for commissions, which is displayed in big red in there if it needs to be, and so on. And it also can pull in the current exchange rate for you from their system and so on. And that was the idea of how to do that. And I was explaining this recently, maybe a couple of years ago, to someone, and they said, well, why don't you just scan it with a phone? And the guy was like, maybe 18. And I said, well, it never occurred to me at that time. And today, if I were doing that, I would probably not do that system. I would just take a phone, create an app where you can just, scan the banknote, and it will tell you what it is immediately. It's absolutely not difficult. All the tools are there. It's so doable, and there will be no design discussion about that thing, because it will look whatever your phone looks like and whatever your camera looks like, and it will take you even less clicks, and that is the zero design, right? This is how things should work, and this is the competency that you should develop as learning and development, because more and more of the stuff that we do goes into this performance support, job support category rather than learning. And I can see people, I can go through you, and I can see people thinking about hey, why did we build this course? Or they asked about that thing, and I will come back to them and tell them we don't need a course. I have another idea. Raise your hand if this is the kind of thinking that is going through your minds right now. So that's the competency that will be way more useful than visual design in the next 5 years and beyond that. Design systems, we talked a little bit about that. Again, finding common places that you can unify, homogenize, and fix. And
once and for all.
Well, maybe not once and for all. A design system is a living thing.
Yes.
But I have a whole separate lecture on design systems from Google and IBM and AirBNB, by the way, as well. It's an exciting thing. Just read up on that. That is so much more useful than learning how to design stuff in terms of visual design. Don't learn Photoshop. Photoshop is that. Automation. This will be the demo that I will conclude with. I promised to show Raivis. I haven't had a chance, so it will be live for everybody. But this is an exciting stuff. And then again, just to conclude, one thing is that visual design has transformed everywhere into user experiences, and for us, the learning and development people, it's transforming into learning experiences, into things which are learner-centric, which think about learners as people who have to be pulled into things rather than pushed into things. It's about thinking about how many thresholds and clicks they have to make before achieving their goal, not getting to the information, and so on and so on. Though, that's I think the big idea. And if I needed to conclude with with that lecture, remember, less is more. So I think that our today's thinking is that it's even more for even less, and that is the mentality that we have to assume for the years to come. And it's a huge shift that it's probably happening, but my feeling is that it's already happened, and we need to catch up for the most part. So thank you for being such a nice audience. In the last 3 minutes that I have, there's a little exciting demo that you can try this at home easily. Maybe some of you have seen that. And if you found this useful, follow us on your favorite social network. Find the INTEA channel on YouTube if you need to share this recording or dig into anything else that we've talked about. There are 2 more breakfasts. Mark your calendars, 2 and 4 weeks from now. And we'll see you. Now on to that demo. This is PowerPoint, and I'm actually speaking at Brandon Hall Group webinar on next Thursday. So if you're interested, I can send you a link. And I was designing a presentation for that, and there is something which really was striking to me. So essentially, let's say this is a slide, and then I will type in something useful here, right? And then I will go and find an image. Let's say nice image forest. Yeah, something beautiful and green, for example, like this thing. I will just copy, as we always do, without checking for copyright or anything, and just paste it here. Right? Is it pasting? Yep, it is. So typically I would start thinking like, where do I put this? Does it look good? Or do we have like a corporate template? So what PowerPoint does instead for me, it does this. So it understands kind of what I'm trying to convey here and offers me ideas, which all of them, or almost all of them, are designed better than I could have done, right? This is an excellent idea. Why don't we do that or that? And the crazy part is that if I have, let's say, 3 points in here, and it will offer me something else, right? It will, there was something, one of the slides where was that? Was this? Yeah, so it understands that, okay, there is information but no image, so it offers me this and even provides icons to me. And I was like, what? Can I do it automatically? Or that? That looks so cool. Or this, and it actually kind of understands the content of the presentation very roughly, right? It doesn't really read it yet, at least, but it comes up with, sorry, no ideas for this slide, just 2 images. But whenever you have content like this one, can we do that? Can we do something else?
And it's only a start, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually discovered it 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, right. Accidentally preparing a presentation, and then I was astonished that actually
it's useful. It's not a gimmick.
It's not a gimmick. It's useful. It's not like those old days, those word art things that nobody ever used. I think,
or rather,
overused.
Were never used properly.
Properly, yes. So now they are doing this, and it's only a start, because what happens next, it will be able to read it, and it'll be able to give you suggestions.
Well, it already does. We have a breakfast on artificial intelligence, and I mentioned that when you open a resume in Microsoft Word, like a CV, and you start writing it, it actually reads it and offers you learning from LinkedIn Learning, which is also owned by Microsoft, on how to create a successful resume. And so it does read content already. So in PowerPoint, it will do too. There are already startups who do actually much better in terms of design, much better job in providing templates and being flexible and so on. I'm sure Google at one point will buy a couple of those and will offer something similar with Google Slides. And now imagine how much info Google has to design this stuff and how much influence it has design-wise on our lives. And this is happening, and this will happen in learning. A company called Docebo, in the recent investor call, I think last Monday, they announced a tool which takes your content from Word or text or videos and creates learning courses out of that automatically by rephrasing that using neural networks to create new content out of your existing ones. I'm sure it will be rough at first. There are companies who tried to do that and failed, actually, even like 10 years ago, but the technology is there already. So this is happening, and no one cares about visual design anymore. So visual design is that design thinking and instructional design what matter now, and they are not, and probably will not until humans remain humans. So this is the topic of our next breakfast in 2 weeks. And for today, thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for those who come here every breakfast, and thank you for those who are new here. It was great to have you. If you have any questions, you know where to find us. See you in 2 weeks.
Yeah, see you in 2 weeks. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.